I was 63 years old when my son drove me into the wilderness and left me beside a broken-down shack with nothing but an old canvas bag and a lifetime of love thrown back in my face. Not a goodbye, not a hug, not even a lie wrapped in kindness. Just these words: flat, cold, final. This is your gift, Mama. You live here now. And then he was gone, engine roaring, dust rising, the sound fading into the dead stillness of a forgotten place. I stood there, alone, in the middle of nowhere, and something inside me clicked. Not broke, not shattered, clicked. Like a lock turning after decades of rust, like a heartbeat restarting after being still too long. Because in that moment, Evelyn Reed, the woman who had spent her life folding herself smaller to fit into corners, stopped disappearing, and I began to return. You see, for 10 years before that day, I wasn't living in my home. I was occupying it, like furniture, like dust, like something useful, but invisible. My husband Paul and I bought our condo on Peachtree Road in 1987. We picked out the tile together. We painted the kitchen sunflower yellow. We argued over curtain colors. It was ours, a home built with love, memory, and 2 lifetimes of small, quiet moments. But after Paul passed, the house changed, and so did I. Darren moved in with his wife, Tiffany. They said it was temporary. They said they wanted to be close. They said, "Mama, we'll take care of you." And I believed them, because a mother believes, because love doesn't come with conditions. Or so I thought. But slowly, so slowly, I didn't even feel it happening. I became less a person and more a function. Breakfast cook, laundry doer, silent background noise. My room, the smallest one, used to be a closet. My books, Paul's photos, his old reading chair, all crammed in like relics no one wanted on display. Tiffany called it minimalist living. I called it erasure. Every morning, I woke at 6 a.m., quietly, so quietly. I made Darren's grits just how he liked them. Strong black tea for him, some floral herbal blend for Tiffany. Smelled like lavender and regret. And for me, plain black tea, sipped alone in my room so I wouldn't disturb their perfect mornings. My Social Security check went straight into their joint account. "Why do you need money, Mama?" Darren would ask, eyes on his phone. "We buy everything together." And I'd nod, because arguing felt pointless, because I told myself, as long as he's happy, that's enough. Even when I gave them the money I'd saved for cataract surgery, so Tiffany could buy a designer handbag to match Darren's career image. Even when she said, "Mommy, you understand," while hugging me like she meant it. I gave it, because love means sacrifice, or so I was taught. But here's what they never taught me. There's a difference between sacrifice and surrender, and I had surrendered everything. My space, my voice, my dignity, even my vision. I stopped buying new clothes, wore what they gave me, stayed quiet when the soup was too salty, stayed silent when they mocked my old-fashioned ways. "If you have advice, Mama, just keep it to yourself." That's what Darren said once, gently, with a smile, like it was kindness. But it wasn't. It was dismissal. It was disconnection. It was the slow death of being unseen by the people who were supposed to know you best. And then came my birthday, my 63rd. No cake, No party, just hope. Foolish, fragile hope. Because Tiffany hugged me that morning. Actually hugged me. Happy birthday, Mommy. We have such a gift for you, you'll gasp. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I put on my best dress, a simple gingham thing with tiny flowers, looked in the mirror, saw tired eyes, but for the first time in years, a flicker of light behind them. We got in the car, drove for hours, city to suburbs, suburbs to fields, fields to nothing. No resort, no surprise party, no spa day. Just dirt roads, weeds taller than a man, and a rotting shack with boarded-up windows and a porch about to collapse. Darren turned off the engine, got out, pulled my old canvas bag from the trunk, set it in the weeds. Then he said it. Not with malice, not with shame, just indifference. This is your gift, Mama. Tiffany and I bought you a house. You'll live here. Fresh air. Good for you. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just stood there, watching my son get back in the car, watching him drive away, watching the dust swirl behind him like a funeral veil. And in that silence, thick, heavy, absolute, I heard something I hadn't in decades. Myself. Not Mama, not mother-in-law, not help. Evelyn. And Evelyn said 2 words, enough now. Because here's what Darren didn't know, what neither of them knew. The condo on Peachtree Road, it wasn't theirs. It was mine. Sole owner. Paul made sure of it before he died. He's our son, I said. Paul looked at me and said, life is long. Anything can happen. You need a roof that's yours. So I signed the papers. Never told Darren. Why stir trouble? Why show distrust? And another secret? 5 years ago, I inherited a small apartment from a cousin, sold it, put the money in a separate account, never told them, because I knew what would happen. They'd call it a loan, they'd call it family help, and it would vanish, just like my savings, my health, my voice. That account, still untouched, still mine. And in that bag Darren tossed into the weeds, alongside slippers and soap, was my old flip phone, the one Tiffany called a grandma phone. No internet, no apps, just numbers and one full battery. No signal at first, just empty bars. So I walked up a hill, through thorns, branches scratching my arms. I didn't care. At the top, 2 faint bars. Enough. First call, Mr. Harrison, the bank manager. Knew me since Paul and I opened our first account. Mr. Harrison, I said, voice steady, clear. I need you to block all access to my accounts from my son Darren Reed immediately. Redirect my retirement deposits and cut off his ability to view any balance. From this moment on, every transaction requires my personal confirmation. Personal. He didn't argue, didn't question, just said, it will be done within the hour. Second call, Marcus Jones, my lawyer. Smart, young, thorough. Marcus, I said, I need you to secure my ownership of the condo. Prepare documents, cease and desist if needed. I'm cutting ties. He didn't hesitate. I'll start today. I hung up, walked back down, looked at the shack, and for the first time, it didn't look like a prison. It looked like a fortress. Because they thought they were burying me, leaving me in the dark, letting me fade. But they forgot one thing. When you plant a seed in barren soil and give it water and sunlight and time, even the most forgotten thing can grow. And I was ready to grow. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning. And the woman they left in the weeds, she wasn't broken. She was awake. And she wasn't coming back. She was taking back. If you're still with me, stay. Because what happened next? It wasn't revenge. It wasn't chaos. It was justice. And it started with a bucket of water and a well they didn't know existed. I didn't sleep that first night in the shack. Not because I was afraid. Not because the floor creaked or the wind whistled through the cracks in the walls. I didn't sleep because, for the first time in 10 years, my mind wasn't crowded with other people's needs. No one was waiting for grits at 6 a.m. No one was judging the tea I chose, the words I used, or the shape of my silence. It was just me, Evelyn, and the thick, heavy truth of what had happened. And in that solitude, something strange happened. I began to remember who I was before I became Mama. Not the version of me shaped by Darren's expectations or Tiffany's disdain, but the woman Paul fell in love with, the one who once argued passionately about poetry at dinner, who kept a journal by her bedside, who knew how to fix a leaky faucet and could name every bird that landed on her windowsill. She'd been buried under layers of compromise, but she wasn't gone, just waiting. The next morning, I rose with the sun, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I washed my face in the icy well water, the shock of it clearing the last fog of surrender from my thoughts. Then I walked the property, slowly, deliberately, as if meeting a new friend. Behind the house, past a tangle of blackberry brambles, I found a second shed, half collapsed but still standing. Inside, beneath a tarp brittle with age, lay tools, a rusted shovel, an axe with a cracked handle, a coil of rope, and, miraculously, a handsaw, still sharp enough to cut green wood. I dragged them out one by one, laying them in the sunlight like sacred relics. That day, I chopped my first armful of branches from a fallen apple tree near the well. My hands blistered. My back ached in places I'd forgotten existed. But with every swing of the axe, I felt something shift inside me. Not pain, but clarity. Each log I split was a boundary I was rebuilding. Each bundle I carried into the shack was a piece of my life I was choosing to warm, to nourish, to protect. That dusk, I'd stacked enough wood beside the stove to last 2 nights. And when I lit the first fire, after clearing the flue with stick and old rags, after coaxing the kindling with trembling breath, the house didn't just warm, it woke up. Smoke curled up the chimney instead of choking the room. The old tiles on the potbelly stove glowed a soft amber, and I sat on the floor, because I hadn't found a chair yet, and watched the flames dance. In that firelight, I made a promise, not to Darren, not to Tiffany, not even to Paul, to myself. I would not spend another day pretending I didn't matter. I would not trade my peace for their convenience, and I would never again sign a single paper without reading every word. The next morning, I climbed the hill again. 2 bars. I called Marcus first. His voice was brisk but kind. "Mrs. Reed, I've pulled the property records. You own that condo outright. No joint tenancy, no trust, no liens. Clean title since Paul transferred it in 2015. Good. Now I need you to file a declaration of sole ownership with the county and send a formal notice to Darren. Any attempt to alter, rent, or sell that property will be met with immediate legal action. Consider it done." Then I called Mr. Harrison.
I'd like to transfer all incoming deposits from the joint account to my personal savings, and I want to cancel all secondary cards, especially the one linked to Tiffany. A pause. Then quietly, "You've come back to yourself, haven't you, Evelyn?" I didn't answer, but he knew. Over the next few days, I worked like a woman possessed, not by anger, but by purpose. I scrubbed the main room with lye soap and rainwater, washed the windows until they gleamed, hung a clean sheet over the doorway to keep out dust and nosy raccoons. I found a cast iron skillet in the root cellar, seasoned it with lard and heat, and cooked my first real meal: fried eggs and wild onions I'd pulled from the garden bed. Simple, honest, mine. Back in the condo, I'd cooked for an audience, always measuring portions, timing dishes to match their moods, swallowing my own hunger until last. Here I ate when I was hungry. I stopped when I was full, and no one rolled their eyes at my old-fashioned ways. The silence wasn't empty. It was permission. On the third evening, just as the fire died to embers, my phone rang. Darren's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 7 times, then I answered. "Mama, where are you? We've been calling for days." "I've been breathing, Darren. The air is clean out here." A beat of silence. Then carefully, "Listen, there's been a problem. Tiffany went to buy groceries and her card was declined. Your account, it's frozen. Did you do something?" "I did exactly what I should have done years ago, Darren. I protected what's mine." "You can't do that." His voice cracked. "We need that money. The property tax is due. The contractor's waiting." "And yet you had enough to buy a new car last year. Enough for spa days and designer bags." He sputtered. Then Tiffany's voice cut in shrill and sharp. "She's doing this on purpose. She's punishing us." I didn't rise to it. I just said, "Figure it out yourselves," and hung up. That night, I sat on the porch as stars pricked through the velvet sky. No street lights, no traffic hum, just crickets and the whisper of wind through tall grass. And I understood. They thought my silence was weakness, my kindness stupidity, my love a resource to drain. But real love doesn't disappear when it's taken for granted. It transforms into boundaries, into backbone, into the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I am not yours to discard. The next morning, I found potatoes in the overgrown garden, tiny, knobby things, barely bigger than marbles. I dug carefully, saving the plants with care. These weren't just food. They were proof that life persists, even in abandoned places, just like me. And as I brushed the dirt from their skins, I made another decision. I wouldn't just survive in this shack. I would thrive. I would turn this ruin into a home, not for Darren, not for anyone's approval, for me. Because the greatest rebellion isn't shouting, it's living well on your own terms. And my terms, they began with a bucket of well water, a stack of dry wood, and the unbreakable truth that I was never the problem. They were. By week's end, the house no longer smelled of mildew and neglect. It smelled of wood smoke, clean linen, and earth. And when I climbed the hill that Friday evening, phone in hand, I didn't call anyone. I just stood there, watching the sun dip below the trees, and whispered to the wind, "You wanted to bury me here, but you forgot. Seeds grow in the dark."
The morning after Darren and Tiffany fled in disgrace, the world didn't shout. It didn't thunder or crack open. It simply settled, like dust after a long wind, like water finding its level. And in that stillness, Something unexpected appeared on my doorstep. Not a person, not a letter, a basket. Woven from willow branches, lined with a clean cotton cloth, and filled with fresh goat's milk, 2 brown eggs, a jar of wildflower honey, and tucked in the corner, a sprig of thyme tied with twine. No note, no name. But I knew. Uncle Kurt hadn't just spoken up that day. He'd seen me, not as a victim, not as a spectacle, but as a woman standing alone on cracked ground, still breathing, still building. And that basket, it wasn't charity. It was kinship. I carried it inside, placed it on my cleaned table, and sat for a long time, just looking at it. The milk was cool to the touch. The honey glowed amber in the morning light. And the thyme, it smelled like memory, like my grandmother's kitchen, like summers when love was baked into bread, not bartered for compliance. I made tea with the thyme and honey, drank it slowly, and for the first time since Paul died, I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to exist. I was here, on my terms, and my truth, and I wasn't alone. That afternoon, I walked the 2 properties down the overgrown lane to Uncle Kurt's place. His house was modest, a white clapboard with green shutters, a wood pile stacked like poetry, and a garden so neat it looked painted. Chickens pecked near a low fence. A collie lifted its head from the porch, gave me one slow blink, and went back to sleep. He was splitting logs behind the shed, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, axe moving with the ease of decades. He didn't look up right away. Just said, "You didn't have to come all this way to thank me." "I didn't," I replied. "I came to ask you if he'll teach me how to split wood without breaking my wrist." He stopped, turned, looked at me, really looked. Then he smiled, a slow, weathered thing like sunlight breaking through clouds. He said, "Woman like you, you'll be splitting oak by next spring." And so began the next chapter of my life, not in courtrooms or bank statements, but in dirt, sweat, and honest work. Uncle Kurt didn't coddle me. He taught me how to read the grain of wood before striking, how to test soil with your fingers. Loam means life. Clay means patience. How to store root vegetables in sand so they last through winter. He never asked about Darren, never pried about the condo or the mortgage. But one evening, as we sat on his porch shelling peas, he said, "A man who abandons his mother on her birthday don't just lose her. He loses himself." I didn't answer, but I knew he was right. For a week, life hummed. I planted seeds in the garden patch I'd cleared, boiled nettles for tea, hung laundry on a line strung between 2 maples. The shack was no longer a shack. It was becoming a home. And then, on a Tuesday, 3 cars rolled into town. Not 1, not 2, 3. I was hanging a sheet when I heard them, engines too loud for these quiet roads, tires crunching on gravel like teeth on bone. My first thought, bank investigators. My second, police. But as they pulled up, dust swirling, doors opening, it wasn't officials who stepped out. It was family. Aunt Carol from Raleigh, Darnell, Paul's nephew with his wife Marlene, 2 cousins I hadn't seen since my mother's funeral. And in the center of it all, Darren and Tiffany. But they were different now. Gone was the panic, gone was the rage. In its place was performance. Tiffany wore a plain navy dress, hair pulled back, face scrubbed clean of makeup, no designer bag, no sharp edges, just wide eyes and trembling lips, like a saint in a stained glass window. Darren looked gaunt, hollowed out, leaning on her arm like he might collapse. He even had a handkerchief pressed to his mouth, for effect. I realized instantly. They arranged the relatives in a loose semicircle like mourners at a graveside. And then Darren spoke. "Dear ones," he began,
voice cracking just enough to sound real. "Thank you for coming. A tragedy has befallen our family."
He paused, let the words sink into the stunned silence. Our mother, Evelyn, she's not well. My stomach dropped. Not because I was afraid, but because I saw it coming, like watching a storm roll in and knowing your roof leaks. She's been confused since her illness. She imagines things, mortgages that don't exist, conspiracies. She accuses us of stealing, of abandoning her. Tiffany stepped forward, voice trembling like a violin string. We tried to get her help. We found a clinic, but she ran away, came here, to this ruin. She gestured at my house like it was a leper colony. She's cut off all of our access to funds. She won't take her medicine. We're terrified she'll hurt herself. Aunt Carol gasped. "Oh, Evie, sweetheart, you need treatment." Darnell frowned. "Is this true, Evelyn?" They all looked at me. Pity in their eyes, judgment in their posture. To them, I wasn't a woman wronged. I was a problem to be managed. I didn't move, didn't speak, because what could I say? Any denial would be proof of my delusions. Any anger, evidence of instability. They'd built the cage perfectly, and I stood inside it, watering can in hand, dirt on my shoes, wearing a dress I'd patched myself. No lawyer, no bank records, no audience but these well-meaning strangers. And then a gate creaked, heavy footsteps on gravel. May I be nosy? What's this gathering about? All heads turned. Uncle Kurt stood at the edge of my yard, hands in his pockets, shoulders square, eyes sharp as flint. He wasn't wearing his work coat. He wore his county commissioner jacket, the one with the faded badge still pinned to the breast. Tiffany's smile faltered. "And you are Curtis Baker," he said, stepping forward. "Neighbor, former county official, and the man who watched your shiny sedan drop this woman off on her birthday and drive away without a backward glance." He turned to the relatives. "I've known Evelyn for 7 days. She's rebuilt a stove, cleared an acre of brush, and planted a garden with her bare hands. She carries water from that well every morning, 50 pounds, twice a day. Doesn't complain, doesn't beg, just works." He looked at Darren. "That how mentally ill people act where you come from?" Then at Tiffany. "And you, crying about no money, yet you drove here in a leased car, wearing $200 shoes, clutching a phone worth more than my truck. If you're broke, ma'am, you're the richest broke woman I ever saw." Aunt Carol's face changed. Darnell crossed his arms, staring hard at Darren. "You threw your own mama out here?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. Darren stammered. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that. And if you'd spent half as much time caring for her as you did faking your grief, you wouldn't be standing here trying to steal her life a second time." One by one, the relatives stepped back. Aunt Carol walked over, took my hand. "Evie, did he really leave you here?" I nodded. That was all it took. Their faces hardened, their sympathy turned to scorn. Darnell grabbed Darren by the collar. "You a rotten little snake. You're worse than trash." Tiffany yanked him toward the car. "Let's go. They're all against us." They didn't walk. They fled. And their so-called rescue turned into a public unraveling. Right here. In the dirt.
where they tried to bury me. When the dust settled, only Uncle Kurt and I remained. I looked at him, tears finally rising, not of sadness, but release. "I thank you," I whispered. He shook his head. "Didn't do nothing but speak what I saw. Truth don't need defending. It just needs witnesses." That night, I sat on my porch, bowl of stew in my lap, the first stars blinking awake above. The legal battle wasn't over. Marcus would still fight in court. The bank would still investigate. But something deeper had been decided today. Not by judges, not by documents, by people who saw a woman standing tall in the ruins and chose to believe her. And in that moment, I knew my son hadn't just lost his claim to my home. He'd lost his claim to being my son. Not because I cast him out, but because he cast himself out when he chose greed over love, performance over truth. And me, I was finally free. By the time spring arrived in full bloom, my hands no longer shook. Not from cold, not from fear, not even from exhaustion. They shook only when I held something precious, like the first sprout pushing through the soil I'd tilled myself, like the frayed edge of Paul's old armchair, finally rescued from the city and resting now in the corner of my clean, sunlit room. Like the pages of the photo album I'd carried in my canvas bag like a sacred text. This place, the shack they meant to make my tomb, had become something far more powerful. A sanctuary, a classroom, a cradle for the woman I was finally becoming. I no longer called it the shack. I called it home. Because a home isn't defined by square footage or granite countertops or designer handbags dangling from doorknobs. A home is where your soul can finally stop hiding. And mine? It had been hiding for 10 years. Now it sang. Not loudly, never loudly, but steadily. In the sound of a kettle whistling over the stove I'd resealed with clay and hope. In the rustle of wind through the peonies I'd nursed back to life, their crimson buds bursting open like fists unclenching after a lifetime of tension. In the quiet rhythm of my needle pulling thread through linen as I embroidered wildflowers onto pillowcases, just like my grandmother taught me when I was a girl who still believed kindness couldn't be weaponized. Every morning I rose with the sun, not because duty called, but because desire did. I wanted to see if the spinach had doubled overnight. I wanted to check if the rain had softened the soil enough for planting beans. I wanted to sit on the porch with my tea, currant leaves, mint, and a pinch of thyme, and watch the mist rise off the low field behind the house. No one rushed me. No one judged my silence. No one asked me to be smaller so they could feel taller. And in that space, wide, wild, and entirely mine, I began to remember things I thought I'd lost. Like how to laugh without apology. Like how to say no without guilt. Like how to cry, not because I was broken, but because I was free enough to feel. One afternoon, as I was mending a tear in my gardening apron, Uncle Kurt stopped by with a basket of fresh goat cheese and a bundle of dried lavender. He didn't knock, just leaned against the doorframe and said, "Your peonies are about to steal the show from every garden in 3 counties." I smiled. "They've waited long enough." He paused, then added, "Most folks my age are slowing down. You're just getting started." I looked up from my needle. Maybe I needed to lose everything to find out what I was made of. He nodded like he'd known that truth for decades. Sometimes the world has to crack you open so the light can get in. And it had cracked me. Not gently, not fairly, but it had opened me. And through that fracture, something unexpected grew. Not just vegetables in the garden or flowers by the fence, but clarity. I understood now. My son hadn't just abandoned me on my birthday. He'd revealed himself. And in doing so, he'd given me the greatest gift he never meant to give: permission to choose myself. That summer, I sold the condo on Peachtree Road, not out of anger, not as punishment, but as closure. Marcus handled the sale quietly, efficiently. The moment the deed transferred, a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying, deep in my ribs, coiled around my lungs, finally lifted. I went back only once, on a cloudy Tuesday, to collect what was left of my life. Paul's armchair, our wedding photo in its silver frame, the blue ceramic bowl we'd bought on our honeymoon in Santa Fe, 3 shelves of books with my notes scribbled in the margins. Everything else? I left it. Let the new owners repaint the walls, replace the floors, erase us. Our story wasn't in the tile or the curtains. It was in me. And I was taking it with me. Back in my cabin, I arranged Paul's chair by the window where the afternoon light pooled like honey. I placed his photo on the sill facing the garden. "You'd love this," I whispered. "The earth here remembers how to feed people who care for it." I didn't talk to him like he was gone. I talked to him like he was watching, like he'd always known I'd find my way back to myself. Just needed the right kind of heartbreak to wake me up. With the money from the sale and the secret savings I'd guarded like a vow, I hired 2 men from the next county, Mitch and Javier, to help me rebuild the house properly. Not just patch it, not just make it livable, make it last. We tore off the rotten roof and replaced it with cedar shingles. We rebuilt the porch with oak beams, wide enough for 2 rockers. We lined the stove with river stones so it held heat for hours. And every day, I worked alongside them. I mixed mortar. I sanded beams. I painted the trim myself, soft white, the color of peace. Mitch shook his head one evening, handing me a cold bottle of water. "You're out here swinging a hammer like you were born to it." I laughed. Maybe I was. And maybe I was. Because every nail I drove, every board I laid, every window I washed until it gleamed, it wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my hands, my time, my right to build something that would outlive the lies they told about me. That fall, I planted bulbs, tulips, daffodils, crocus, deep in the earth, even though I knew I wouldn't see them bloom until spring. "Why plant something you won't see?" Javier asked. I patted the soil smooth with my palm. Because hope isn't about seeing the flower, it's about trusting the season. And I was learning to trust again. Not in people, not in promises, but in cycles. In the truth that winter always ends, that seeds remember how to rise, that a woman discarded like trash can become the soil in which her own future grows. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Uncle Kurt, sipping tea from chipped earthenware, he said, "You've done more than survive, Evelyn. You've resurrected." I looked out over the garden, now neat rows of carrots and kale, herbs hanging to dry in the shed, the peonies resting for winter. "I didn't resurrect," I said softly. "I finally stopped letting them bury me alive." He smiled into his beard. "Ain't no difference, neighbor. Ain't no difference at all." And in that moment, wrapped in the quiet hum of crickets and the wood smoke curling from my chimney, I knew. I wasn't waiting for my life to begin. It already had.
I'm 65 now. Not broken, not bitter, not hidden. I sit on my porch most evenings, tea in hand, watching the light soften over the fields like a blessing whispered by the earth itself. The air carries the scent of warm soil, blooming jasmine, and wood smoke from my stove, the quiet perfume of a life rebuilt, not repaired, but reimagined. And when I look back on everything, the betrayal, the silence, the shack, the well, the courtroom shadows that never fully reached me, I don't see wreckage. I see rebirth. They thought they were ending my story when they left me by that rotting porch with nothing but a canvas bag and a lifetime of swallowed words. But endings only belong to those who stop writing. And I picked up the pen. With blistered hands, yes, but with a heart that finally remembered its own name. You might wonder, was it worth it? All that pain, all that loss? And I'll tell you this, yes. Not because suffering is noble, not because abandonment is a gift, but because truth is. And sometimes the only way to hear your own voice is for the world to go silent. And the months after Darren and Tiffany fled in disgrace, life didn't roar back. It unfolded, slow and sure, like a fern uncurling after winter. Marcus closed the case with finality. The mortgage was declared void, fraudulent, unconscionable, invalid. The bank issued a formal apology, and the district attorney, after hearing from Aunt Carol, Darnell, and even Uncle Kurt, opened a criminal inquiry. I never pressed for jail time. I didn't need vengeance. I needed freedom. And I got it. Not in a courtroom, but in the quiet certainty that no one would ever again hold my life in their careless hands. With the proceeds from the condo sale and my untouched savings, I didn't buy luxury. I bought security. A new roof that wouldn't leak in the rain. A wood stove that warmed the whole house. A well pump, hand-cranked, reliable, mine. A small investment portfolio Marcus helped me build. Nothing flashy, just enough to sleep soundly. And a kitten. Vasia, found shivering under the porch one stormy night, all bones and wide green eyes. Now she rules the house, napping in Paul's armchair, batting at embroidery thread, and curling into my lap the moment I sit down. She doesn't care about my past. She only knows I feed her, warm her, and speak softly. And in her trust, I found another kind of healing. Uncle Kurt still stops by every Tuesday with goat cheese and gossip from the county seat. He calls me General Reed now, half teasing, half proud. "You ever think of running for something?" he asked last week, sipping mint tea. "Like mayor of this ghost town?" I laughed. "I've already won the only election that mattered, the one where I chose myself." He nodded into his beard. "That's the hardest office to hold,
And the most important, I used to believe dignity was something others gave you. A nod in the hallway, a seat at the table, a voice that mattered in family decisions. But I've learned something truer. Dignity is what you refuse to lose, even when no one's watching. It's choosing to wash your face in cold water when you're abandoned. It's planting potatoes in soil that hasn't been turned in decades. It's saying no when your whole life has been yes. And most of all, it's looking in the mirror after decades of invisibility and recognizing yourself. I still talk to Paul sometimes, not in prayers, not in grief, in gratitude. "Thank you," I whisper, touching his photo on the windowsill, "for making sure I'd always have a roof." He couldn't have known how I needed, not just over my head, but over my future. And Tiffany, Darren, I don't hate them. Hate is a chain, and I've cut mine. I pity them, not for their punishment, but for their emptiness. They thought love was a currency to be spent, not a well to be shared. They mistook my kindness for weakness, my silence for consent. And in doing so, they lost something I can never give back: my trust. This spring, my peonies bloomed so fiercely, their crimson heads bowed under their own weight. Uncle Kurt stood in the garden one morning, arms crossed, shaking his head. "Never seen them grow like this. Must be the water." I smiled, or the truth. Because that's what this garden is now, not just flowers and vegetables, but proof. Proof that life returns, that beauty persists, that a woman cast aside like trash can become the soil in which her own joy takes root. I don't know what became of Darren and Tiffany. Marcus said they left the city, that their credit was ruined, that they faced civil penalties they'll be paying for years. But I don't check. I don't care. My life no longer orbits their choices. I wake when I want. I eat what I grow. I read books with no one judging my taste. I embroider wildflowers onto linen just because they make me happy. And every evening, as the sun dips behind the pines, I sit with my tea, my cat, and my peace, and know with bone-deep certainty I am enough. Not because I survived, but because I refused to disappear. If you've walked with me through these 5 chapters, thank you. Not just for listening, but for witnessing. Because stories like this, they're not just mine. They belong to every woman who's been told she's too much and not enough. Too old, too quiet, too inconvenient. But here's the secret they never wanted you to know. Your value was never theirs to decide. And your story? It's yours to write, from this breath onward. If this moved you, leave a 1 in the comments. Subscribe to Auntie Belle's Heartfelt Tales for more true stories of courage, dignity, and the unshakable power of starting over. With love and a cup of time tea waiting for you always.